Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here on the stage and speaking to all the audience here. Arshad Nawaz. I've been in the retail space for about 14 plus years experience, and I am part of a data science organization that supports the whole enterprise, and me specifically supporting real estate. Today here, I'm going to talk about how spatial analytics is transforming the use of data and extracting that additional alpha that's available in the data, and how spatial analytics integrates into the company's strategy rather than just being a fancy map. I'll cover three main areas today. I'll start with two core areas where we are using spatial analytics today um, from a strategy perspective. I'll talk about how scaling works and matters to us in an enterprise as big as Samsung. And then I'll also address the part around privacy and governance, which is a fundamental part of how we scale spatial analytics while being compliant with security policies. I'm going to start with the first application around real estate space. This is pretty much the battlefield for where spatial analytics has its role to play. We are here not just talking about dots on a map, but this is a key area for a company to start. Where's the next store that we open to continue to grow as a company? At a fundamental level, having households that can support opening a new store and the area that has some sort of population growth are the bare minimum requirements to consider to open a store. This work is what we call as a white spacing in our area. To enable white spacing, we need data, and we are collecting a lot of internal data sources that is customer oriented. We are working with our stakeholders to understand what kind of external factors do we need to consider as part of this equation for white spacing. We are scouring through multiple data sources externally and internally, putting it all together into a package that can help us identify where those opportunities are across US. Now, as we scour through all this data, build this equation, we are putting this on a map. And there are many areas in the country that will satisfy these conditions, right? A lot of population and growth. Here's where the science part is combined with the art part, where understanding it's not just about data saying that there's an opportunity here, but what's the on-ground reality? Is it worth buying a land here in an XYZ place? Think about New York or New Jersey. These are very expensive places. If we open a store here, which is spread across multiple acres, that store is never going to break even from a profitability standpoint. So we're combining that science from the data and the art piece of actual real estate to come up with a filtered list of where those opportunities are. Now, let's imagine at this point we have found those places across the country. This is where people from the site selection team are going to the ground and saying, hey, let's go search for a piece of land in this area. What does it cost? Can we build a store on top of it? Are there any issues with the land? And things like that. So this is where all the groundwork happens. And they bring a piece of dirt to leadership to say, hey, we're going to go open a store here. Now, let's say we have opened a store in Kansas City, making this up. There will be an organic flow of customers to the store because there are so many households in a certain area. I hope we made that due diligence before. But after that, there is a lot of work to be done from an acquisition standpoint. And this is where understanding what customer profiles look like from an existing member base, that's leveraged by combining it with external data sources like demographics, social media footprint, and research around what the local economics of that community look like. Here, by combining all this information, we not only know that they want to shop, but we also try to understand why they shop and what they are shopping. So combining these two applications, which are pretty much at the extreme ends of the process of opening a store and going acquiring members, spatial analytics is serving as that bonding agent to put together a strategy for leadership that they can see, follow, and make the next big bet. Switching gears to scaling, how scaling matters to big enterprises, and how do we tackle that using the infrastructure that's available or implementing new technologies that are necessary to scale. I'm also going to cover a little bit of what works from a communications standpoint for strategy development with leadership in this section. So first of all, as I said, the applications are enormous, but in those, even if you consider those two use cases, there's a lot of customer data, right? Where we have millions, and sometimes it can turn into billions of records as we integrate external data sources. In traditional world, call it 6 years back, there were tools that were not able to harness compute powers that is available on servers, and rather a lot of the geospatial coding used to happen on local PCs, which happens today also. That was fairly unsustainable, especially when we are dealing with a lot of data. So in today's world, we fortunately have the capability of having cloud compute. So, you could call it any data warehouse today, GCP, BigQuery. The ability to leverage what's there in the compute from these data warehouses to do this geospatial analytics, I think that has created a very huge advantage in how we leverage that data from a geospatial standpoint. Tools like Carto are enabling us to put all these millions of records of data on visuals using techniques like static and dynamic tiling that allow us to not only cache the data, but also leverage the backend power of the cloud data sources. When communicating strategy to leaders, what we find typically from our learnings is that there needs to be a common ground that needs to be established with them, that makes sense, that resonates with them. Geospatial area has a lot of layers, different types of building blocks that you can use. But understanding what works in a certain environment, I think there's a fine line that needs to be drawn there. Once the visual layer comes alive with whatever the strategy, whatever the recommendations that the data says, executives appreciate the fact that it's infographic based. It can be easily digested instead of lots of Excels or even SQL scripts that can take 2-3 layers of interpretation before coming to a conclusion. So what works, what doesn't work, where's the next bet, I think is generally more communicable to the leadership through these visual layers. I mean, I should have a slide from Mr. Keith's presentation here to show that visual, but I'll borrow it later from him. Moving on to the next phase of the grunt work that is involved in building a geospatial strategy is privacy and governance. This is probably the most boring part of the work, where we have to work with legal and infosec teams to understand what the current policies are, what the rules are that need to be followed in order to build these kind of tools and then share it across the company. How do we do this today? One, obviously, we are showcasing what the use cases are, what kind of data does the tools and spatial analytics contain with these legal and infosec teams. Get it blessed by them, one, but also understand what are the gatekeeping rules. How do we manage access to these systems? Set those up so that people who are supposed to have access can only get into it, get to the information that is relevant to them. Build pipelines that are talking to the core data sets of where members or customer data are coming from, so that when things change at source, everything is flowing out to the analysis that you're putting out there. What I mean by that is, in today's world, there are privacy laws changing all the time where a specific state says that, hey, you cannot store X data anymore for the customers, or you should remove Y data from a customer's profile if they don't want to store it. Building data pipelines that are tapping into the source is taking care of it, all those compliance rules. We are building pipelines that are flowing all those rules to the front end, to the analysis, so that we can avoid any kind of compliance issues later. This part is really fundamental because we could have the most glamorous and insightful tool that we build with all this data. But if there are compliance related issues or infosec related issues, it's really easy to get into a spiral and even shut down the applications. Now, you might have all noticed that I didn't speak anything about AI. And the reason behind that is, I think getting to AI and agentic AI, all the hype terms today, it's a journey, it's a process. And where we are today is the foundation work that is necessary to build a good layer, a good information layer that business stakeholders can use, come up with use cases that we can learn from, support with insights for those use cases. But later on, combining all this rich foundational data and the work that's been done with those real use cases, that's when you can build effective agents, AI on top by combining those two things and automating all that insight work so that the stakeholders can self-serve these insights by themselves instead of relying on analysts. So in conclusion, spatial analytics, I think, is a core part of, should be a core part of every strategy, because it is an angle that is fairly underutilized across companies. But it also gives you this additional power or additional alpha that can be extracted And that combined with using the right infrastructure from a technology standpoint and being compliant with the rules that have been laid out, I think that's a great way to leverage the data along with spatial analytics that are available in the company.